I am vlogging this experience in Arabic because there is zero content in Arabic for Green Party from the West. So I'm hoping to vlog as much as I can in Arabic the events at the A&M. So this one will be for the Arabic. Yes.
Is there any Green Party that speak Arabic languages?
Yes, the Green Party. There's Green Party in Lebanon. There is Green Party there are Green Party in the Middle East. And not all states in the Middle East allow for parties, political parties, but ones that do, they have Green Party. I know there's in Iraq. The Lebanese one, I know I'm originally from Lebanon, so it is an active one, and we are in communication with them. They are very active, and they're currently leading that federation that they're part of the Global Greens. The Lebanese Green Party is the representative of that federation currently, so it's empowering them too in that way. So today's talk is about a concept that was born with me through this long struggle of trying to create change that is stable. And the first inspiration came to me when I was in France. I've dedicated a couple weeks in France to study the French Revolution. It was very interesting to me. I've studied the American Revolution before, kind of have an interest in history. And then I studied the French Revolution, and then I went to France by myself to just dedicate time studying the French Revolution. And there was one painting that depicts a moment in history that inspired this thought, which I'm going to come to talk about it. But the gist and the spirit of this concept that I've later written into a book called the Universal Declaration for Human Values is that documentation, establishing a statement or a document or a written, a written document is one of the most important actions that a human progressive movement can do. Some don't. We have a lot of movements that started in history that have not established and highlighted a document. Yes, there are books, there are manifestos, but shorter set of rules or declaration, it usually outlives the life of the movement and the life of the heroes of that movement. And of course, religions have their holy books, which are very important for the religion. And we have seen throughout human history how these documents became more influential than the movement that established them, than the people who have written them. And sometimes they have become much more effective years, decades, and sometimes centuries after they were written and ignored. I have a short video to show that just goes through 9 minutes of the history of some of these documents, and we'll come to the rest of the presentation.
Human rights is, geez, that's a good question.
Human rights. Oh, that's tough.
Wow.
I don't even know how to give that a definition.
I would probably have to do a little bit of homework or something.
Any right that I think just as a normal, human, any...
The rights that humans have?
This is a very large debate.
Tú le puedes preguntar a 20 personas y te van a dar 20 diferentes opiniones.
It's not shared.
We take them for granted that they're there, but we don't even consider what they are.
Well, it's taking it from here. It's taking it from the mic.
Human rights are the rights you have simply because you're human. It's how you instinctively expect and deserve to be treated as a person, like the right to live freely, to speak your mind, and to be treated as an equal. There are many kinds of rights. Most apply to a certain group. But human rights are the only ones that apply to absolutely everyone, everywhere. That means kids, old people, poor people, basketball players, garbage men, rappers, teachers, Africans, Indians, Albanians, Christians, Muslims, Kabbalists, atheists, your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor, and you all have the exact same human rights. In other words, they're universal. But the question remains, what are they?
Name the human rights?
What the human rights are?
The right to live, equality between all peoples.
Right to religion, the right to...
Is there supposed to be a list somewhere I should be aware of?
According to the United Nations, there are a total of 30 human rights, which are usually lumped together and called simply human rights. They're all listed out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the world's most widely accepted document on the subject. But it was a long time in coming. At first, there were no human rights. If you were in with the right crowd, you were safe. If you weren't, well, you weren't. But then a guy named Cyrus the Great decided to change all that. After conquering Babylon, he did something completely revolutionary. He announced that all slaves were free to go. He also said people had the freedom to choose their religion, no matter what crowd they were a part of. They documented his words on a clay tablet known as the Cyrus Cylinder. And just like that, human rights were born. The idea spread quickly to Greece, to India, and eventually to Rome. They noticed that people naturally followed certain laws, even if they weren't told to. They called this natural law, but it kept getting trampled on by those in power. Not until 1,000 years later in England did they finally get a king to agree that no one can overrule the rights of people, not even a king. People's rights were finally recognized, and they were now safe from those in power. Kind of. It still took a bunch of British rebels declaring their independence before the king got the point that all men are created equal. Which isn't to say he liked the idea, but he couldn't stop them, and America was born. The French immediately followed with their own revolution for their own rights. Their list was even longer, and they insisted that these rights weren't just made up. They were natural. The Roman concept of natural law had become natural rights. Unfortunately, not everyone was so thrilled. In France, a general named Napoleon decided to overthrow the new French democracy and crown himself emperor of the world. He almost succeeded. But the countries of Europe joined forces and defeated him. Human rights was again a hot topic. They drew up international agreements, broadly granting many rights across Europe. But only across Europe. The rest of the world somehow still didn't qualify. Instead, they got invaded, conquered, and consumed by Europe's massive empires. But then a young lawyer from India decided enough was enough. His name was Mahatma Gandhi, and in the face of violence, he insisted that all people of Earth had rights, not just in Europe. Eventually, even Europeans started to agree. But it wasn't going to be that easy. 2 world wars erupted. Hitler exterminated half the Jewish population of Earth in horrifying Nazi death camps. And all told, 90 million people died. Never had human rights been so terrifyingly close to extinction. And never had the world been more desperate for change. So the countries of Earth banded together and formed the United Nations. Their basic purpose was to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of a human person. But what were human rights? Were they the proclamations of Cyrus? The natural laws of Rome, the declarations of France? Everyone seemed to have a slightly different idea of what human rights should be. But under the supervision of Eleanor Roosevelt, they finally agreed on a set of rights that applied to absolutely everyone. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The French concept of natural rights had finally become human rights. So, in summary, at first, only a few lucky people had any rights, until one of those guys decided, hey, other people should have some rights too, which was great, except not everyone agreed, and it only took a few thousand years of fighting and declarations and more fighting until everyone finally agreed that human rights should apply to everyone. And they all lived happily ever after. Except for one little problem. If people have the right to food and shelter, why are 16,000 children dying of starvation every day? 1 every 5 seconds. If people have freedom of speech, why are thousands in prison for speaking their minds? If people have the right to education, why are over 1 billion adults unable to read? If slavery has truly been abolished, why are 27 million people still enslaved today? More than twice as many as in 1800. The fact is, when it was signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not have the force of law. It was optional. And despite many more documents, conventions, treaties, and laws, it's still little more than words on a page. So the question is, who will make those words a reality?
I have a dream today.
When Dr. King marched for racial equality, he was marching for rights that had been guaranteed by the United Nations for almost 2 decades. But still, he marched. When Nelson Mandela stood up for social justice in the 1990s, his country had already agreed to abolish such discrimination for almost 40 years. But still, he fought. Those who fight today against torture, poverty, and discrimination are not giants or superheroes. They're people. Kids, mothers, fathers, teachers, free-thinking individuals who refuse to be silent, who realize that human rights are not a history lesson. They're not words on a page. They're not speeches or commercials or PR campaigns. They are the choices we make every day as human beings. They are the responsibility we all share to respect each other, to help each other, and to protect those in need. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere.
All right, this can be, or I can see it, an ad for the Green Party itself. You see, the thing about proclamations is they are better than us. They are better than humans. They are better than their authors. Authors write these proclamations and then they are held accountable for them. I'll give you an example. President Wilson wrote the 14 points. When he wrote the 14 points, they went along the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, some of the universal American values, or what Wilson perceived as American values. But he was then immediately put under pressure of these points. It was very difficult for him to make these points come to fruition during the peace conference after World War I. So when Wilson attended the peace conference, and America had a very important role in the peace conference, it was not very happy represented. Of course, America is always going to be the mood of its representative. And at that time, President Wilson was not happy with the secret treaties, with the colonialization, with the distant or the extent that Europe has gone in its colonization and exploitation of people. And he perceived the United States as being better than that, and he went there with these 14 points, one of which is the consent of the governed. Arabs attended that conference. They were struggling to establish their own state at that time. Prince Faisal, with a group of Arab delegations, they attended the conference lobbying for the American consent of the governed. And after confronting President Wilson with that, of course, when President Wilson talked to Britain and France, they told them, this is for Europeans. We're not thinking about Africans and Middle Easterns when we talk about that. I'm using Middle Easterns because it's within its colonial context. But he said then, but when Prince Faisal faced President Wilson and continued to present and talk about the Wilson's consent of the governed, President Wilson said, okay, we have to honor that commitment and send a commission, which, there were all kinds of obstacles in front of this commission. It was almost never sailed, but eventually he sent the King Crane Commission, who was totally American. The British and France did not participate. They were not interested in all these values. They're just on ink on paper. But President Wilson was reminded by some of the good people in the American delegation that the honor of the United States is behind these words, and we have to send this commission. The commission was sent, and they didn't fear that the commission will fail. They feared that the commission will succeed in finding what the people want. And they found what the people want, and the King Crane Commission report was put in the desk of President Wilson's in the Oval Office, and he had a brain stroke. He left, and that report was never established, or read or published, which had what the people actually wanted, the consent of the governed, what the governed wanted. But it was never published until years after his death, and it was, of course, useless at that time. So he had the word, the proclamation, the 14 points. He was pushed to send the commission because he already made the proclamation, but then it failed to come to fruition. And that's where we have the challenge. How do we bring these into action? So the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, has the judicial system behind it that sometimes you can actually have force to bring it into reality. This is challenged by so many aspects, like we see with this current administration and government that tries to create loops around this Constitution and Bill of Rights. But then at the end of the day, you have the judicial system to fight back. But most of these proclamations and declarations, do we have a system that will protect them? So the Declaration of Independence of the United States, with all its shortcomings, it's still one of the greatest documents ever produced. And the French, when they were fighting the king and the noble class and all the ills that was brought by the kingdom, this is the oath of the tennis court. If a little bit of history, in 1789, when the national delegation went to Versailles to meet and vote, and the king knew what's coming, so he shut down the parliament, and they insisted on meeting, so they met in the tennis court, and they said, we are the people. Our statement, our vote is what matters. So they refused that the king has canceled the National Assembly, and they met anyway, and they voted, and they wrote the Declaration of Citizen and Rights at that time, which was one of the greatest documents written in French history. And they took an oath to fight for that document till death. One of the authors of this document is Robespierre, sitting right here. He's not even the one holding it up. He's one of the founders of the French Revolution. By the way, he was in contact with Benjamin Franklin. The French and American revolutions were born from the same womb. They were born from the womb of enlightenment, of the French Enlightenment and the European Enlightenment, which was, Rousseau and Voltaire has, built on it, and a lot of intellectual struggle and work to get it to a point where it was ready for the next stage of implementation. And Benjamin Franklin, he used to sit with Voltaire. Voltaire was very old at that time, but I've seen the place that they used to meet in Paris. And Benjamin Franklin used to sit also with Robespierre, and that little street in close to Saint-Germain in Paris is a lot of the revolutionary thought was established and built. Anyway, of course, the connection between the American and French Revolution. They were both feeding and inspiring each other. With all the criticism, of course, there is always criticism that you can set aside, but in general, it was a good move forward. This painting that I stood in front of it, and the focal point of it is the document, has kind of started a light bulb for me that one of the strengths of the American Revolution is that they focused on what they have written. Because you know what? Many of these guys became bad guys later, as you know. Yes. Robespierre himself is not a model to be followed. And if it was inspired by a person, and that person was its saint or savior or prophet, and then that person falls or fails, or then the whole movement fails with it. But because it's focused on a document, he basically got a consequence, just like the others got consequences, and the movement continued to grow and shift and change and grow, regardless of the persons who are claiming its leadership some points of time. So documentation was very, very, very important. Some countries to this day, their constitutions are subdued. Saudi Arabia, for example, doesn't have a constitution, so the proclamation, that documentation is very important in our movement, because we are building something that can outlast us, can outlast the movement itself. And that's important to us in the Green Party, because we are also a movement. We happen to be an institution and also a movement, which is one of our challenges, really, but that's reserved for a different talk. So the movement can be preserved by it becoming these proclamations, and we do good with that. We have the 4 values, and we have the 10 key values, and we have our very elaborate platform. These are very, very important. Documentation, very important. Sometimes I put proposals through the various committees or the steering committee, and I tell them that I think the most valuable thing about this statement that we're going to vote on is just to be part of history, that the Green Party has voted on this one day, because we don't know what happens, and we have to freeze some of our thoughts, some of our stances. We have to freeze them in time, in statements, to be at least part of history, to know that the Green Party, because we've seen Green Party shifting in different parts of the world. So it's very important for us here to establish some of the value of these statements is just in that. We know that, it's not going to have a lot of actual effect on the ground, but at least it becomes part of this collective mind in the future. So having an upfront non-negotiables, when I've put these values together, I wanted to establish my values. Especially, I got to a point in my life where I moved from being, accepting values as I have inherited them, whether through my religion or my traditional upbringing, and I wanted to establish my values, my free values. I want to have more free thought in finding my values. So I brought all this documentation that was, important and influential throughout history, read them, tried to find the common themes. So I did this effort for a couple years and came up with 20 values that I pronounce as my values, and I've shared with many to give me feedback. Of course, they're open for improvement, but I've come to a point where I declared these are my values. So when an organization was established and they called me to be part of its board, I sent them these values. I told them, do you accept these values? Because these are the non-negotiables for me. If you accept these values, then we can work. And they actually accepted them, and they actually passed a resolution to make it part of their organization's values, which came to play a part at a later stage when some of these values were challenged. It was brought up that you have a resolution that accepts these values, so now you cannot turn your back to them. Equalization of principles, talking points of negotiation, guiding document for building alliances, the glue for the diverse secular movement. We're going to have always differences. The more free-thinking people there are in an organization, the more diverse the thoughts, the more differences that will be found. This is a healthy sign of individual free thinking, of individual strength. But how does that not translate into fragmentation in the organization is by having a set of values that we all agree on. We can differ on other values. We can have people on the right of them, on the left of them, but at least there is core values that we all want to make a reality. And that's enough for us to be around them. And it's very important to be pragmatic in that. That's my personal opinion, that being pragmatic in that sense, that you have non-negotiables, and then you open up to the less non-negotiables, the more negotiable principles, or the principles that you don't want to set as non-negotiables. You open up space for people to differ. It's very important. The organizations that have all 100% same values and no differences are not democratic organizations. They're like totalitarian parties that have such thinking, where there is no dissent. But if you're going to advocate for free thinking and democracy and the progress of thinking, you have to create the environment for a wild garden to grow and compete for the sun, as long as it is within the same boundaries and the same frames that you're working with. I'm not going to go through these 20 principles in details, but in summary, and again, these are kind of the summary of all these documentations. And in the book, I list the references. This book has a interesting story. I was always asked the question, if you were left on an island, what book, and you had to choose one book, which book it would be. And I've always struggled with that because, I really want a lot of things, and I don't have. So I created a book that has these documents, because if you're going to start from scratch, you need some of these documents to establish a new society. So this book is two parts. One part is my part, where I've explained these values and my statements, and then the part of resources has a collection of important documents that I found important in the progress of human civilization, among which are some ones you probably haven't heard of that are more Eastern in their nature. Some of them are Islamic documents, like, for example, the letter of Imam Ali to Malik al-Ashtar when Ali ibn Abi Talib, one of the Muslim caliphates, he didn't last long. He was too just to lead for a very long time. He was assassinated 3 years after he became caliph in about 650 AD. He sent his one of the companions as a ruler of Egypt, and he sent with him a letter detailing how to be just ruler. So this is, for example, an important document in Islamic anthology for establishing just rule. So I've included it as a resource and many other documents, also among which are verses and sections from the Bible and Quran and Torah. So I've listed all that in that book, but this is the effort of collecting and summarizing them into 20 points: freedom, equality, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, sexual freedom, which whenever I'm interviewed about this book in an Arabic channel, they always start with this. They're like, why do you always ask me about this one specifically? So sexual freedom, governance and meritocracy. Rules of order are interesting. Having parliamentary rules, such as Robert Rules of Order, some parliamentary rules to ensure that meetings are held efficient and democratic. I consider it one of the core values that we have struggled with to get to. So it is very, very important. They might seem a little bit technical or simple, but they're actually a very important manifestation of civilization. Separation between religion and state, welfare, penal codes, security. I'm going to leave you, you can read. I've written these online, and also you can get a copy of the book. Due process, capital punishment, public force and taxation, education, arts, science and culture, human flow, environment and animal rights. I think this is the one that I struggled the most with. It took me the longest time to find a common ground between those who think that using animals for consumption is unethical and those who don't. So I think I've negotiated both parties to find a common statement that can be acceptable for both and can be acceptable to become translatable politically. Social contract, and I think the most important one and the most relevant to our time is the last one, which basically says those who are denied the rights given to them by this declaration shall seek arbitration and peaceful ways to achieve them, and have the right as a last resort to rebel against tyranny and oppression manifested in the defiance of such rights, and everyone shall be in support of them. So if you take oath to these values, if you have this value, this means you have to stand every time with those who are denied any of these values. And they have the right to resist, they have the right to fight if peaceful ways does not achieve it. So you know what, this book was not, it's very difficult to publish anything in the United States, but it was actually had a better audience in Europe. So I had a book signing in Paris for this book, and I went there for the book signing. But the book signing was scheduled for October 10, 2023. And October 7 started. And by October 8, we knew what's coming. We knew that Gaza is going to be erased. That there was the officials in the Israeli government were speaking in defiance of international law. They were declaring their intention of genocide. Clear and simple. Calling Palestinians human animals, preventing them, promising to prevent them from water and food, etc. So I canceled the book signing because I was shocked and confused within that context. And the context was going to be Gaza at that time, because all these values are being trampled on. With the approval of the French government and the British government, and we're not going to shy to speak about it, and the venue, was too early for them to allow it, so I just canceled. I told them, if we don't speak in the context of the ongoing genocide, then we can cancel the event. So we canceled the event. But just to tell you how these proclamations that we have worked for as a human species for centuries on, they are the best of us. They are the best thing that we've come up with all these years, that with one decision we can just forget all about them and act in defiance of all of them. And the struggle today is not actually to have better values. It is actually just to come to implement the values that we have proclaimed and that we have found and that we have agreed as a human species that they are the best values for us, and to implement them in an equal way, and to treat all humans as equal as we have long time ago proclaimed to be. So the struggle became Article 20, is that we are living in, for example, in Western countries, Eastern countries had a long, when I wrote this book, I was hoping that this book would be inspiration in many of the countries that lack democracy, that lack freedom of expression, that lack freedom of religion, etc. In the organization, one of the organizations we were active with, which was Muslimish, one of our goals was to abolish blasphemy laws all over the world. There were 13 countries that had apostasy as penalized by death. So that was one of the things that we were fighting for, is that people can change religions or switch their faith or switch their convictions without being threatened by death. But after 2023, the struggle became international. Now, also the Western countries have either been conducting or supporting genocide, except very, very, very few. I remember the first vote for ceasefire that took place in the Senate with 100 senators voted against, including Bernie Sanders. And I was very disappointed. And I wrote on that night that how can you vote on something and then go sleep at night knowing that your vote is actually killing children that night? Like, how can you do this? Like, abstain, quit, but don't put your signature on blood. And I've written previously in the context of the Syrian revolution that one person being slapped on the face by the government, by an authority of the government without legitimate reason is enough for that government to fall. We're not going to wait for Sidnaya and all these crimes against humanity to realize that the government should fall. But today's world, we see what's taken place, and these countries, it became silly. It became silly to give speeches. It became silly to celebrate human rights. Things became silly. We actually struggled with things afterwards. Holocaust museums started to lose context. I used to organize tours to the Holocaust Museum. I wanted everyone in our community that I can get reach of to visit the Holocaust Museum, because this should never happen again. And now, what does it mean to visit a museum that shows any type of human struggle while we are paying for ethnic cleansing and genocide, supporting it either by silence or by it's very difficult time, but it is also an awakening time for us to fight for these values. These values, we shouldn't take them for granted, and we need to fight for them. And the Green Party is the only political path to the ballot in the United States that actually stands solid with the human rights values and fights against the destruction of these values, that either by our government or by any other government, and they have a proven record of standing with their values no matter what the political price is. Thank you.
So did you bring your book for sale?
You know, I came by train, so didn't have a chance to carry with me the books, but it's available on wherever books are sold. It's available.
And you said it's free online. Did you say that?
It is, yeah. It's written in the form of articles online, so if you look for it, you'll find it.
Okay.
And if you want it as a book, it's available on so many
Amazon?
venues. Well, one of which, yeah, but available where all books are sold.
If you have questions and want to go to the mic, you can. Otherwise, you can repeat their questions if they don't want to go to the mic.
Sure.
Sorry. No, that's all right.
Yes, sir.
I was just curious about how, because I know I hear a lot of people talking about, about the genocide against, Palestine, and then I hear other countries as well, and sometimes it's really hard to tell if the other countries as well that I hear about are basically the same. I guess how Israel is performing genocide on Palestine, then I hear other countries as well. So sometimes it's really hard to understand, you know what I'm saying, which side is doing what, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I know Palestine's, but I guess there's other countries that are part of that as well, if you know what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah, so the question is about the Gaza genocide. I know it is difficult really to keep up with politics and everything that's going on, but I say there is a responsibility if your government is not doing this. Like, we elect politicians to take care of these things, but if our government is failing us and it's not protecting our values, the values of the Constitution, the values of our country, the values of our society, the human values, the human rights, then it becomes our responsibility to understand what our government is performing in our name. And I know it's a lot to ask for, and the educational system in the United States does not really help in creating aware citizens, but it becomes an individual responsibility, really. And there are a lot of things taking place on Earth today. I don't claim that any one person can be really aware of everything that's taking place. But as long as we are, trying to be as aware as possible on what's taking place and trying to take a stance. And the easiest way is basically to elect the right people to office, because that's their job. They're going to do that 24/7. is representing your values. But what we see today is no representation of values. Most likely, it is more a representation of lobbies and corporations and various ideologies sometimes. One of the major events that's taken place, other than the also genocide in Sudan and in Congo and all the breaches of human rights across the nations, I just heard this morning that the number of the slaves today are multiple times the number of slaves in the 18th century. Something that we thought that we have passed long time ago. So it is a continuous struggle. We can't do we can't be aware of all the struggles. We can't focus on all of them, but we can focus sometimes on a solution that is a comprehensive solution. And I always tell, when I speak to my community, I tell them the Green Party is a comprehensive solution to the world, because the United States is leading the world. And if the Green Party is effective in penetrating and making a change in the American government, then as a result, it will have a positive change on the rest of the world. So it's kind of your effort, your vote as an American citizen is so much multiplied, so many multiple times because of that effect. One of the major events taking place right now is Israel's attack on its neighbors, mainly the genocide that took place in Gaza, and now the ethnic cleansing taking place in South Lebanon. This is where my family came from, and they are devastated. I can't tell you. We have no house of any aunt or uncle that's left standing. It cost $80 of TNT to blow out a house, and Israel is systematically erasing the villages in South Lebanon, house by house. Our community back in Dearborn is totally devastated because of that. Last week, my grandmother's house was totally erased. My aunt's house was erased. We tried to hide the news from my aunt. You see, these people, they've worked 40, 50 years to build it, wall by wall, brick by brick. So there's no insurance, there's nothing, so it's gone, the whole work is gone, and that's not what's important. What's more important is the memories that are held and the history that's held in that house. So my grandma's house is the house that my mother was born in, my 6 aunts, 3 uncles, and it became the house where if any of us visit Lebanon, we go back and we stay in that house. Each wall of its walls has history and has memories. Each room was built after a few kids were born. And there are walls that were destroyed by certain, the consecutive wars with Israel. The village is Bint Jbel, if you heard about it, one of the important villages in South Lebanon that has been always under the attack and or occupation of Israel. There was a wall that nobody sleeps in that room because that wall is not very stable because of the bombing of 1978. And and my grandma, she rests in peace. She used to. This is very, very symbolic image that cannot be erased from my mind. The empty shells of the Israeli bombs, she used to use them as vases to plant flowers because they're like metal, heavy shells. So on the balcony, there were all these shells of rockets that she used to plant flowers in. So this house was totally erased last week. How they know this from Google Images, so they constantly watch. So that's what's taking place in South Lebanon. There is no ceasefire, of course. There was never been.
I thought there was a ceasefire.
Ceasefire is only comes from one side. Israel never ceases fire. So there's never been a time where ceasefires was respected by Israel. They always have an exception anyway. They say ceasefire unless we have a target. Yes. Is there a question in the back? You had? No. Okay. So these two things are taking place other than the war on Iran. That's also an illegitimate war. 4,000 people have died in Iran already. Totally unnecessary war. And it continues. The region instability continues. Yes, sir.
I have a question. You mentioned that you said something that the slavery has extended beyond the numbers that we're all used to in the 1800s. Could you expand a little bit on that, please?
I don't have really knowledge. I just heard the number that there is actually more slaves now than the 18th century. So I know that slavery is still going in one form or another, but in its ancient form, it's still going. There are in parts of Africa that humans are taken into hostages and sold as slaves, and Libya was a gateway for that trade for a while during its instability. So that apparently is still taking place. Also, there are other forms of slavery where you take a worker, and that worker is basically is indebted for life for whoever they're working for, and it's just another form of slavery.
Well, that's why I was curious if you would consider the conventional American lifestyle to be slavery.
Yeah, I would, you know, that would be, if we argue for that, the number will go really up. But that's true, you know. It's, you know, the way I have a new book that was published this year called A Sanctuary of My Own. And I've written a chapter about the aggression of civil order. That sometimes you build civil order on a certain system of love and communion. Sometimes it's built on aggression and fear. So our social order here is built like any contract is built on fear and penalties, and you know, you go into business and then you know you take a loan to open your business. So they take you as a personal guarantee. If you lose it, then they're gonna take your house and they're gonna take your car, and you know. If you get into the schooling system, the college system is all based on, if you do this, there's a fine. There is always an aggressive consequence for shortcomings. And it's fine. You say, okay, it's okay. We have to, you know, obey the law, and we have to go by the rules. Yeah, that's fine. But what kind of spirit or society we are building that's based on fear? And that's why we have a whole culture of attorneys and lawyers and lawsuits. So it is form of, you know, if you don't go to work, then you will lose your house, you'll be on the street, you can't pay for your medical needs, you can't pay for your children's food. So you end up compromising a lot of values, right? I mean, we've seen this tested in the... I have a lot of my friends who, after Gaza situation, they've canceled their social media. Because although we live in a perception of freedom of expression, there's no really freedom of expression. It will cost them their jobs. It will cost them their, alike might cost them, you know, their job or their future careers, retroactively nowadays.
We kind of have to wrap up, so.
I'm ready to wrap up. Yes, sir. Maybe take a final one. Yes.
Okay, I've done that before. You see, it's the funny thing.
Can you say it in the microphone so it goes into the Zoom? I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. It's Richard Gomez, Fresno, California. The thing about it you mentioned is fear. Fear is how governments are broken down. Because when you're frightened, you get scared, you don't do things that you know you should do, or you do things that you shouldn't do, especially when you know you are protected from doing bad, horrible things that are going on right now. I mean, this covers a lot of things, but fear has always been known to destroy a civilization. Generally, for example, taking away a person's livelihood. Because as we just mentioned, when you take all that livelihood away and you endanger them, they do get desperate, they may do something, or things will happen to them that will ruin their lives. And history shows that they've even gone to problems with violence to themselves, to their family members, or doing all sorts of activities like too much alcohol or too much drugs. Fear is a very effective method of destroying a human being also. But as we've seen like over 100 years ago, the idea of today we call it the Human Rights Convention. But before there was another thing before the human rights, I think it was the League of Nations. The idea was that when countries have problems, that other countries can get together and help them resolve them or prevent violence and war and fear. This was the idea, the goal of it. But we have seen in the last 80 years that the United Nations is not abiding by the rules that they put down. In my humble opinion, for whatever it's worth, I do believe that somehow that what's going on and has been going on in Israel and Palestinians has been more about that there's a very that our government and other governments honestly believe that there's a big financial payout, a huge financial payout. That's why they'll look away from what's been going on for all these years. It isn't so much about hate, it's more about fear, it's more about trying to control because they want the extra wealth. It's like, I want the money, I have to choose between money or the reality of human life. We got so many people, what the heck, but we don't have enough wealth. Even people who are already wealthy beyond the need. And it does disturb me a lot because too many people, because there was I believe it was either Stanford or San Jose, where half the students were portraying prisoners and the other half were portraying guards. And what happened was those students who were portraying guards started beating up and badly treating the students that were portraying prisoners. There was no law broken, it was just an exercise to find the psychological aspect to this whole thing. But because the guards believed that they were not going to be punished, there are tests where people would be connected to a machine and the person who would be off screen every time they pushed a button.
Yeah.
Then they would yell and scream. At first, the person who pushed the button would be nervous, but it says, "Don't worry, it's okay." And they would continue to push it. And too many of those people went all the way.
Yeah.
And it's scary to think that humanity is that way, but we have our government that's allowing this, and we are allowing them to do that.
Yeah. You mentioned two experiments, by the way, the Stanford prison experiment and the obedience to authority experiment, which are very important in human psychology. You know, the United Nations, which used to be the League of Nations, it was set up the wrong way. It wasn't set up for authority, and it's failed multiple times, and there's nothing more failure than today, where the actually United Nations repertoire, human rights repertoire, is being punished instead of what they're reporting on. And the ICC was set up to implement the international law, and now the ICC is being punished instead of Netanyahu being arrested in New York. He's going to walk in New York, and only federal authority, like Mayor Mamdani said yesterday, only federal authority can stop him and arrest him. So we have failed. We failed, and we've proclaimed that failures is very clear now. And one of the main reasons for that failure is the administration of the United States. And that's, you know, the core thing that we are trying to change through the Green Party is to have a more representative government, because today it's not. It is the, as Dr. Jill Stein says, the government, no, it is the parties of Wall Street and war. Thank you.
Steve Bloom. I just
Hi,
wanted
Steve.
to say
How are
hi.
you? Nice to meet
we
you.
talked online.
Yes,
The
yes.
reason I come here is to meet people face
Yeah,
to face.
nice to meet you.
One thing, hard of hearing, I use hearing aids. When you make a film that has music and somebody speaking, I
You can't tell,
understand the words.
Yeah. Well, you didn't miss anything that you don't know already.
I understand, but it's very frustrating.
Yeah,
But just so you know,
Yeah.
one fact in the film, Mohandas Gandhi was his name, not Mahatma.
Really?
Mahatma was the title, the great one.
Right, yeah. Good to know, thank you.
Everybody thinks his name was Mahatma.
Yeah.
Should have came this one.
Hello, how are you?
Kurt
Wissam.
Bolton.
Hi, Kurt, how are you?
I'm from Wisconsin. Where are you from?
Michigan. We're Midwest people, huh?
No, I go to Michigan quite a bit.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, I think you're right on the whole thing about part of your money.
Okay, sorry, Angelo from upstairs is calling me. So I
Yeah,
don't,
it's the guy in the other
I
room
just
was
went
talking
in
about
the
stuff. I said, you know,
the stage that
Wisconsin,
was
we gotta think
there,
about we believe in diversity. So
you
it's
know,
like, yeah,
and
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Didn't know you're that tall.
I take minutes.
I forgot good looking. I don't know why.
So
is
I
it
got
virtual?
feedback
Is it the virtual
forms
people that
I
are
made for
participating?
every workshop.
Oh, yeah.
So people can fill them out as
Okay.
they go, because they'll forget.
Yeah. Did they get some?
Well, for the
the
last
virtual
one.
ones.
So I'm here early this
Ah, okay.
I'm just webinars. We're just
Sorry, I